the reasons I like playing golf when I can get a game in is that I can beat Tiger Woods. I can, really. I can beat Tiger Woods because of my handicap. So could you. So could anyone. The entire handicap system is designed to level the playing field between different golfers so that the worst player in the world could play the best player and still have a meaningful game, all other things being equal. It's like Chelsea running onto the field to play Hitchin Town but already 3-0 down before the ball is touched at the kickoff. There are many different ways of scoring in golf, but my favourite way is to play in teams in what's called the Texas Scramble, which I think of as the Christian way to play golf. In this system, you play in a team of 4 or 3. Everyone takes a drive, and then the whole team agree on which drive puts them in the best position. When that's been agreed, the best ball is marked with a tee peg, and then everyone takes their golf ball and plays their own ball from within 6 inches of the tee peg, even on the green, even on the fairway. The process is repeated for each shot, including putts, and so the team can end up with a fantastic joint score at the end of the round. Level par, nothing special in this version of golf, because after all you have effectively had 3 or 4 attempts at each shot to achieve as near perfection as between you can get. Now the great thing about the Texas Scramble is that it's a team game. I mean, how many times on a golf course, if you play, have you bemoaned the fact that you can belt the ball miles off the tee and dead straight like any pro, but your second shot always lets you down? Or how many times have you managed to get on the green, but you know that you putt just about as well as the Venus de Milo would play the piano? Well, with Texas Scramble, you don't have to worry about it, well, at least not too much. You might be useless at driving and brilliant at little chips up onto the green. It doesn't matter. One of your team members is bound to be the other way around, or perhaps even so brilliant at everything that the team can afford a bit of a passenger, you, who can mosey along in the shadows and occasionally pull off the fluke good shot which gets the team a birdie. Now by now, unless you're severely intellectually challenged, you will have guessed that there's a point to make about the Christian life in all this talk of golf. And there is, and it's this. Well, we all keep score, don't we? Not just in golf, but in our lives. We have a mental double-entry bookkeeping system. I did all these things right, which ought to outweigh all of this when the big auditor in the sky audits my accounts. I suppose we've been brought up with the notion of the recording angel, the heavenly being with the big leather book, taking shorthand notes of all we do. We've even had Hollywood musicals and movies based on that idea. Remember Carousel? When you walk through the storm. If life was actually a round of golf though, what scoring system do you think God would use? We human beings struggle to make sense of our lives, and we struggle on often alone and make huge errors in relationships, in understanding, in self-knowledge. If we don't acknowledge that we can't get round the golf course of life on our own, either in spiritual or merely human terms, which naturally I think of as being part of a continuum, then we disable ourselves. Because we cannot ask for the help that is actually available if we don't believe it's there. We're also conditioned to blind ourselves to the help which is at hand for fear of losing our individuality, which is strange because all the evidence of the teachings of Jesus points towards the idea that far from losing ourselves through knowing the truth and opening ourselves up to God, we are set free to gain or regain our true selves. Even Jesus called on his Father for strength and help. That same help is available to us if only we would ask. We're not equipped as human beings to be alone. Loneliness is one of the great spiritual diseases of the present age, and we collude in it when we live as if we were the only people who mattered. As if our own strength, our individual willpower, and perhaps our own immediate family are all that mattered. The British government of 1979 to 97 of Margaret Thatcher was perhaps the first official agency to declare openly the cult of the individual. But whilst they managed to create through their philosophy hundreds of millionaires, they also created millions who lived and still do live in misery. A shallow spiritual desert of breathtaking proportions is the legacy we hold today from that time. As a minister, with one exception I can think of, I've never buried a bad person. Almost every bereaved family I've ever visited has said that their dad or mum or brother or whatever was always wonderful with the kids, wouldn't do anyone any harm, and lived for their family. The Tory ideal, in fact. I'm sure that in most cases this is probably an accurate reflection of how they feel about the person who's died. And it might even be an accurate description of how that person actually was, for all I know. After all, as my rabbi friend once said to me when I was in a cynical phase about all the saints I'd buried lately, who died and left due to be the judge of the state of a person's soul. The point is, why should the fact that someone looked after their family be counted particularly as righteousness? According to some scientific atheists, the selfish gene theory on its own would take account of that without recourse to altruism. And yet, for at least the last 40 odd years, and in particular in the UK, we've held up for public adoration the idol of the family and the self. Or as Jesus said, what father, if his son asked for bread, would give him a stone? Even the wicked look after their own. Asked Donald Trump. If you're truly interested in what it means to be Christian, then have a look at the Texas Scramble scoring system. You see, I believe that Jesus was came to earth, to show us what it means to be truly human. Not what it means to abjure our humanity and become some kind of spiritual clone. Jesus works to perfect us, not by standing at the sidelines and judging, but by getting in there and playing the game with us. Because of his presence in your life, you are in effect being able to benefit from his expertise. Just as if you were in the same Texas Scramble golf team with Rory McIlroy or Dustin Johnson, or preferably both, of course. He doesn't just say, look, play it this way, but look, play your ball from here, where mine landed. Why is it then that so many people hearing this good news say in effect, no thanks pal, I'll just play my ball out from behind this big oak tree? Part of the blame lies at the feet of the church for the way in which over the centuries we presented Jesus and through Jesus God. But part also lies at the foot of the society we've created and its insistence on rewarding those whose contribution to the spiritual and physical well-being of society, whilst pursuing purely personal ends, is negligible, bordering on non-existent, whilst taking for granted those who actually give value and richness to so many ordinary lives at cost to themselves. Dependence on others, even dependence on God, is allowed to be seen as weakness, when in fact to acknowledge that dependence is not weakness, but strength. It is strength because it recognises the truth about humanity, and especially the truth about Christians. We cannot truly live with depth, empathy and true and lasting joy and fulfilment without relationship with other human beings and relationship with God. Unfortunately, Christians have often been as guilty as everyone else, even in their expression of their faith, guilty of pursuing the chimera of the individual above all else. And what always puts me off Christianity, and always has since my teens, and it still does, is the sanctified version of the I'm all right, I'm up the I'm all right, Jack, I'm up the ladder motif, which Christians can often play. We're exhorted to do all the right things, to follow all the right rules, to give to charity, to love our fellow human beings, not because it happens to be the right thing to do, but through fear of hell. Do these things for this reason, and you are effectively saying to hell with everybody else. I know where I'm going, and helping you is a means to an end. Well, the fear of hell scenario is always given as the implicit interpretation of the parable of the sheep and goats, for example. You know, the one in which Jesus is pictured as sitting on a throne and saying, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was sick and in prison, you visited me. And all the good guys say, Lord, when did we do all those things for you? And Jesus says, well, when you did it for the least of my brothers and sisters, you did it for me. And the bad guys, well, they get told that they did not do all these things. And when they ask when it was they didn't do it, they were told, when you did not do these things for the least of my brothers and sisters, you did not do them for me. Now the next bit is the bit the ranters like. Because someone goes to hell, where there is wailing and gnashing of teeth, and the others all swan off to heaven. And when then asked, do you want to go to hell? No, we will have to reply. And then get out there, gang, and feed those beggars and clothe them until you empty Marks and Spencer, clear the shelves at Tesco, empty that reservoir to give them a drink. And that misses the point entirely for me. See, the good guys in the parable did not do what they did for fear of hell. They were not going around desperately seeking Jesus in the eyes of every beggar. They didn't even know they were doing it for Jesus. They were just doing the right thing. We can't ask people to become Christians purely out of a personal desire to escape the fires of hell, especially if by doing so we encourage people to use others merely as a vehicle of their own salvation, some sort of proof that they've done what they needed to do to make sure of a tick in the book and a berth in the ship of glory when it leaves for the heavenly shore. Actually, a word, I guess, would be quite apposite now about this hell business in relation to this cult of the individual. I've never been happy about it as a doctrine, and I was mightily relieved when I discovered others who felt the same. I might as well come clean here and say that I suppose I have to be counted as a universalist. For those of you who do not know what that is, the simplest way to explain it is to say that I don't believe in eternal damnation, or certainly not in the way it's always paraded by some of my fellow Christians. And I'll tell you why. It's because I know God loves me. And I know that at times I am far from lovable, that I do or say things which upset others unnecessarily, but I know that God still loves me. Now, I don't think God would want miserable people in heaven, but if it makes me miserable to think of, say, my father, the atheist, in hell, how do you think it makes God feel? I mean, I'm going to be there, hopefully. No, I'm afraid I couldn't put up with it. If I'm wrong and there is eternal torment for those who refuse to follow Jesus, like my dad, then God had better put me right down there with them, with the damned. After what I've just said, some Christians are smiling grimly and saying, don't worry, Al, your room has already been reserved. But that's their problem, not mine. And I don't think it's God's either. Mind you, I reckon that if hell really exists, it's probably full of people who did all they did in this life, even in their religion, for their own advancement, and not for the benefit of others, or because it was the right thing to do. Hell, if it exists, is probably, in the words of Oscar Wilde, full of self-made men who worshipped their creators, and people so scared of getting it wrong, of messing up their scorecard and ruining their handicap, that they were incapable of getting it right. Some people might still say, having read this, no thanks, I'll just walk completely on my own, I don't need you suckers. It's my belief that we're stronger together than we are on our own. And I think if we look merely and narrowly for our own salvation, then we might as well be damned. See, I'm pretty well convinced that Jesus, assuming he's a golf fan, and who isn't, would be a fan of a spiritual version of the Texas Scramble format too. Or at least that's what he told me last time I putted in his drive for a birdie at the ninth. I reckon you see that if hell really existed, then whilst even just one of God's children struggled there with what they had been or what they had done, then creation's work would not be complete. So that's where I might well find Jesus. Stay safe, people.